Hello YouTube, and thank you very much for coming back for another video. Today I want to go over my pull plans, talk about the banners and events that are going to be coming out here for us on Global in September. And before we get too far in, please do remember, like, drop a comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. However, today I do also want to give a shout out to a gentleman by the name of Goose, who he's actually on one of the Discord channels that I'm in. He has been putting out these character overview, in 30-second videos. And if I can figure out how to do this, because I've never done one before, I'm going to put a reminder to self, put a card on the video right about here to link over to his channel. Drop the man a subscribe, you want to. And without any further ado, let's get on to the video. So first up for the month, we've got Setzer. He's probably going to be dropping here at the end of August, but I'm going to go ahead and lump him in with the rest of the banners on September, because we don't really know when he's going to show up. So he gets a small rework. Freeze Joker gets a few more hits. Basically just hits harder, and it doesn't consume his Brave at the end of the turn. His skill 2 red card gets, I think it's 3 additional uses, something like that, and it has Brave Refund in between the hits, so it does more damage. As far as his LD goes, the legendary LD, it is an AoE Brave attack, full AoE HP damage. And it gives him a debuff with his boards for 9, or it gives him a buff, for 9 turns, and he gives it to the party for 6, which is how he enables the prismatic Brave damage numbers. The percentage chance of it going off, because it is RNG, its percentage of triggering is based on the number of turns left on the buff. So the more turns you have, the higher the percentage chance of this activating. For himself, I believe it's between 7 and 9 turns. It's a 70% chance. So it'll be triggering fairly often. It also gives, as far as his boards and things go, he gets a ton of party attack up. It's like 70% party attack. As well as party overflow and HP damage up. And while this buff is up, it increases the duration of all of his debuffs that he inflicts by 1 turn, which basically just means an extra turn on Freeze Joker, which is fantastic. For his LD call, he has buff start, right? So he will be hitting those prismatic numbers himself, but he does not grant it to the party or anyone in the party or the caller or anything like that. All it does is give the party some attack and overflow, as well as HP damage up. So do not pull for this thinking that it's gonna be your new partner with Jack and Kurosame calls, because it does not work like that. As for Setzer's high armor, he has I believe it's the Unity Keystone, so it increases party Brave caps, and for his high armor plus, it is the Brave split armor. So he actually cranks up your party's Brave damage cap by like 20%, which is basically BT auras, which is incredibly strong, especially given that his whole, his shtick is increasing your damage by basically forcing it to cap. So really, really, really good. That being said, if you do not plan on using Setzer a lot, okay, do not blue his armor. And if you don't, and this, some people might think this is a little mean, if you don't know what you're doing with Setzer as far as team compositions and stuff, do not blue his armor. Don't try and throw him into absolutely any party and then get mad because, oh, my party's not doing enough damage, I don't notice that Setzer's having an effect. Like, you have to understand, Setzer is a tool in your toolbox, and he is, he's like a flathead screwdriver. Sometimes you're gonna need that Phillips, sometimes you're gonna need a hammer or a pair of pliers. Understand what he does, and when you're going to need it. Okay. Keep in mind, he does not pair particularly well with characters that are really fast or turn stealers. So your Titus, your Lightnings, your I probably wouldn't pair him with Aranea because she doesn't really need the help. People with lots of free turns don't, or like instant turn rates, don't put Setzer with them. They're going to burn through his buff really quickly. And while he does have 4 uses of his LD, I mean, for a normal character, that's going to last, 24 turns or, whatever. You're going to get a lot of uses out of it. He does, however, pair really well with characters with any kind of, off-turn damage. So, pair him with someone like Galuf, or Trey is a really good example. Trey will get 1 turn and he might do 5, Brave HP attacks before he gets his next turn. So this is, just keep in mind that there are certain kinds of characters that are really going to benefit from that extra Brave damage, and then there are characters that won't. And some of them, they don't really play well with the concept of having those buffs. As for Waka, the kind of other character on the banner, he will only be getting his high armor here, which I believe is the split armor, which I believe is for the party, which it's decent. If you want to use Waka a lot, hey, knock yourself out, go ahead and blue it. But for most people, probably not going to happen. As for me, what are my plans? I plan on pulling. I'm pretty sure I'm going to go in with this with tickets, though. Not because I don't want Setzer, but because I feel like Setzer would want me to gamble on that shit. I'm really looking forward to using him. If I can pick him up, I will be bluing his armor, because I can think of plenty of characters that I would be interested in trying to pair him with. But, your results may vary. Next up is the LD boards for Vaan, Ardyn, and Kefka, which comes with a triple banner. We'll probably be getting this for the next Equinox event, so probably anticipate that the event will have something to do with them, and there'll be synergy. We'll start with Kefka. His LD boards make it so that his LD inflicts his debuffs from his skill 2, so attack, defense, and speed down before he does the attack, which means it will frame them, which is really nice, makes it more efficient. The skill itself becomes a double dump with full AoE damage rather than splash, also great. It now deals weakness damage and grants you a free skill afterwards, which is also really good because it helps out Kefka's longevity, because you're basically just spamming skills with him back to back to back to back to back. And while his EX has a pretty quick recharge, the thing about it is you're using a lot of skills very quickly. And at least for Trine, I don't think that the skill count is that high, so something to keep in mind. He also gets a new buff called Dancing Mad, which grants Embrave based regen, which is really, really good, as well as overflow and brave damage up. And then he also gets a sort of mini BT effect, which is HP damage up for each debuff present on the enemy, which stacks up to 40%, which, if you stack it with his burst, is 80% HP damage up, which is massive, massive, massive damage, which goes really well with his new High Armor Plus, which leans in the HP direction. Really good for Kefka. His call, though, is kind of It's Brave damage up, as well as increased overflow and some Embrave regen for a few turns. Not exactly breaking the bank, but it could be useful, I guess. Then Ardyn, he gets I don't want to say he gets more, but he's all right. He's still playable, His LD becomes a double dump, first of all, which is a godsend. He really needed this. It also, this is another really big quality of life change for Ardyn. He gets 2 hat stacks right off the bat when he uses it, which means that instead of trying to get Ardyn to go first and then do a break with skill 1 and then your C65 and then break him again so you can get up to 5, you just LD, boom, you're done. It does grant a free skill afterwards, just like his EX, which also really helps because he's another skill spam character. I can speak. The buff itself, the immortality buff, Overkill, also gets a slightly increased duration, which is nice, as well as Brave and HP damage up, and it lets him increase the duration of all of his buffs by 1 when he grants them to himself. So basically Overkill, and I think it's his buff from his skill 2. So they'll go up by 1, which it's nice. It's a nice quality of life adjustment, but it's nothing huge. If he had gotten just, I don't know, just something, just a little more, he would be a whole lot better. As it is, he's just kind of underwhelming. His LD Call grants max Brave and attack up, as well as Brave and HP damage up. Kind of, I mean, it can be useful, but it's kind of bleh. Like, most people, you know, the only person you would really use this on is your BT character, and there are better calls, so I would not go chasing it just for that. Then we've got the star of the show, Vaan, the golden boy that everybody is talking about. He gets a rework so that, to start with, all of his skills, I say all of his skills, skill 1 and skill 2, they gain a whole lot more HP dumps and more hits. Skill 2, I believe, has Splash, and it regains Bravery in between the hits, which is really nice. So it is kind of your go-to DPS option in a 2 or more boss fight, which is most of them. Whereas his skill 1 is really good for pushing one specific enemy, or if there's really only one enemy, right? The big fix from his LD boards is that when he attacks, he automatically imperils the enemies with an aura, kind of like Bart's, but it's for every element, so he can't really be locked out of fights. And because of the way his kit works, with skill 2 giving Brave gains in between the dumps, even if the enemy absorbs all of Vaan's elements, he can still probably crank out something like 500,000 damage a turn. It's very, very strong. He's very, very good now. As for the LD itself, with his boards, it gets 1 more use, which is huge. It's really, really good. And he now gains the buff before his attack instead of after, which is nice because it gets attack up. His Brave can't drop below 20% at any time, kind of like his BT effect once again. And it is another one of those attacks where it's only a couple of hits, but it's got lots and lots of HP dumps. It's got 6, which is going to really help out the damage of the LD itself, right? And it also now grants his Flight to Freedom buff, which he had off of the plus versions of his skills, or using his EX, which his EX is now a dead button. Don't ever press it. Just pretend it doesn't exist. Take it off of your character if you have to. Just don't do it. That buff gains max Brave up, overflow up, and HP damage up. Also really good. You definitely want to maintain this. The big thing here, to kind of go along with it, with his rework, is that his skills, it used to be that you would have to use all but one of his skills and they would switch over to the plus variant, right? You had to use it 5 times. Now it does it after the second skill use, which is very, very good, because after your first one, you're starting to get follow-ups. So now you have, 5, I think, uses for each skill, ignoring the LD completely. And these are all plus, right? So you're going to be cranking out a couple million damage. No problem. No problem. Vaan got a lot here. It's very, 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 very good. As for his High Armor Plus, he has the Attack Keystone, which goes into the, I believe it's the split direction. So it's an even split between Brave and HP damage. I think that getting the High Armor, obviously a really good idea if you plan on using Vaan, like, at all. I think that as far as the plus, though, he doesn't really need it necessarily. Like, it's gonna increase his caps and everything, but he deals so much damage anyway that you can still see a pretty significant investment without going so far as to blue him, you know? you could toss him a book and he would still be just fine. Oh, I forgot about Ardyn's high armor. Ardyn's high armor is also split Brave and HP damage up, which her Brave cap and 8 held Brave limit up. Jesus, I never talk like that. So it's decent for him, you know, but it's not something that I would really get unless you're a big Ardyn fan. You want to play him a lot. I barely touch my Ardyn. I don't even have the regular high armor on him, so that's that. As for pulls, what? Oh, wait a minute. Vaan, right? LD call, max Brave up, overflow up, HP damage up. That's it. Okay, we're done. Pulls. I am missing Vaan and Kefka BT. So I really want to try and spend gems here, if at all possible, so that I can maybe land a lucky burst. If I don't, that's fine. You know, it's whatever. Triple BT banners are really good to pull on, though. Even if you have everything, a lot of people are like, oh, well, you know, I don't really need anything from here. I have all the bursts, or, oh, well, you know, I don't really want to chase this one because, you know, when am I ever going to use Terra, or, you know, whatever, right? The thing is, these banners are heavily weighted so that it's way easier for you to pull a burst. Way easier than any other banner, right? Because your odds are exactly the same for any given burst, but there's 3 of them. So you've essentially tripled your chance of pulling something. And if it's something you already have, that's 5 burst tokens in the bank, right? That you can then turn around and use to, you know, pick up a burst from another character so that you don't do something stupid like pity a burst. Don't ever do that. And, you know, it's a really good investment, you know. You can spend, I don't think you should go to pity one of the LDs here by any means. Maybe Vaan's. But, you know, dropping, you know, 10, 20k, something like that, you know, you get a burst, boom, you're done, you're out. You've now spent way less for 5 burst tokens than you would normally. And you can turn around and use that for any of the really, really good bursts that are coming out here soon, like, you know, Yuna, or maybe you want Zidane, maybe you missed Y'shtola's burst, you know, maybe you want to grab Twins, or Garland, or Ace, or whatever, you know. You now have more to play with, and this is a very solid investment. So I plan on pulling here. So at this point, we start September proper with the Yuna BT cycle, starting out with Act 2, Chapter 4, Part 1. I think that's right. For this one, we've got Desh, Gao, and Gilgamesh on one banner, and then Yuna, Trey, and Locke on the other, with, I believe it's Trey, Gao, and Desh, I think, as the returning LDs. And of course, Yuna gets her LD and Burst, as well as a rework. On this one, we'll start out with the other characters. So Locke and Greg, they got nothing, so ignore them. Here, Trey gets his High Armor Plus, which is the attack keystone, so extra damage, but it leans in the Brave direction, so his follow-ups and traps and everything are going to be dealing more damage, which is really good. Gao basically just increases party Brave damage even further, so if you really like Gao, you could use it, but he's a little outdated, so And Desh, kind of similar. He has the Unity Keystone armor, and also increases party Brave damage output. As someone who really likes Desh, even I don't know, it's a hard sell for me. Yuna, however, that's an easy sell. Yuna got a rework, which makes her skill 1 no longer take up a turn, so it's free turn, basically. And it increases the amount of battery she gives to everybody, which is great. And then skill 2, her cheer, is now an instant. It's no action delay, so instant turn, and also free, so also really, really good. And it increases the healing and the battery from that, and it increases the duration of all of the like the buffs that she grants. to 12 turns, which lasts a really long time. Her LD, oh man, she got a loaded LD. Kind of like Sayador, it starts off with a party cleanse, which is very, very good. And then it does a battery, right? And it is an AoE triple dump attack that batteries in between hits, or Brave Refund, I should say. And it gives her EX overhead for Valifor, right? It also gives her a new buff, which is party max Brave attack and Brave damage up. And then if there are no debuffs on your party members, it also gives you more max Brave and attack up, right? As well as HP damage up for the party. And it also increases Yuna's Brave damage even further. So she is churning out a lot of damage now, okay, while still supporting her ass off. As far as her Brave and HP attacks, she does get upgraded versions of those from the LD as well. The Brave Plus is a double dump, okay, or they're both double dumps. Excuse me, both of these attacks are double dumps. And they increase the rate at which your EX gauge fills, so it's going to fill a lot faster, so she feels a lot better. She's a lot more streamlined, right? The Brave version is single target, and the HP version is split AoE. Okay. Then, for her burst, it starts out with a battery, and then it does 5 HP attacks where she keeps all of the Brave that she has, and then does a split AoE Brave HP attack. As far as the effect goes, keep in mind that this stacks with her LD, okay? The effect is that it increases party Brave damage, so Brave damage up. It increases the Brave cap, so the amount of damage you can deal with a single hit, plus party stolen overflow up. And then, if there are no debuffs in the party, it also increases Brave and HP damage, and it increases your HP cap. So, honestly, this is really, really strong. Like I said, it stacks with her LD, so your party is able to put out some really incredible numbers in terms of damage, and I would strongly suggest going for this LD, and I never pity the burst, okay? Don't do it. But might be worth tokens. And then, of course, there are other banners that we'll be talking about as well. So hang on to those tokens for now, okay? As for high armor, Yuna has encouragement armor, which is really good because she's got that extra, the increase to her battery, which is phenomenal. And as far as the plus, it's the split armor for the party, so she'll be increasing your Brave and HP damage caps. As for the fight, this one is the Sanctuary Keepers, so Final Fantasy X boss, awesome. For the fight, the orb is +1 for every turn that you take where there are no debuffs, like if the character has no debuffs, right? And then it is +15 turns when you cleanse debuffs. So ideally, the way that she'll get through this fight is by letting them take turns and cleansing periodically. I'm sure that there's probably a way to no boss turn this. I'm sure that somebody out there has done it. But the enemies themselves, they do apply debuffs pretty regularly, so maintaining the orb, pretty easy. That being said, their recast is very annoying because it applies a warp style debuff. So once the afflicted character takes a turn, the boss will jump up and take a turn, which is very obnoxious. I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe they also have HP regen, and they are immune to launch, and they're immune to HP damage up. So no Gabrant, no Ignis, no Kurosame calls here. You're limited to, regular, not cheesy as hell calls, right? Big sad. For pulls, I believe here what I'm going to be doing is going with gems because I need to get Yuna's LD. I am doing a lot of pulling this month, as you will see. So I will token the burst if I need to, and if not, whatever. But hopefully I will get it either here or on one of the other banners. At some point during the month, we're likely to get, for what JP had was the very first paid LD banner, where you drop some money. I believe it will probably for us translate to about $75 US, which is a little absurd, but whatever. And what it gives you is a ticket that you can use to draw on a specific banner, which features Golbez, Onion Knight, and Kuja LDs. You can only get one of those 3 weapons, and it is completely random. If you are missing all 3 of these weapons, and you're a Mega Whale, you still shouldn't pull on this banner. Golbez, every one of these characters has a burst, and they will be coming back at some point in time. I believe Golbez comes the quickest. It might be Kuja. Don't quote me on that. But none of these characters are so good, right, that you really need to have them right now. They're not going to change the way that you're playing any of this content. Frankly, they're slightly outdated, and you should just ignore them. Okay? Don't do it. After that, we get the Shinryu raid, right? And this features Agrias. Agrias is really fantastic. She gets a rework here. So her skill 1 is now a double dump, and it increases the amount of healing that she grants to the party. And then her skill 2 is now 100% AoE instead of split damage, so full AoE. And it batteries the party before the Brave hits. So she's going to be dealing more damage, and it helps make the rest of the party safe, which is very nice. As for her LD, oh man. So for this LD, she starts out by doing a party battery into a triple HP dump attack that has Brave Refund in between. And then it also refunds one use of both of her skills, which is incredible if you consider what her skills do. And then it also gives her a special Brave attack, which is just a single HP attack, I think there are some Brave hits, but single dump with Splash, and it does refund Bravery afterwards. And it inflicts a unique debuff for 1 turn to the enemy, which is Confuse, so it's a stun, basically. And it also increases the Brave and HP damage that the enemy takes. However, her weapon itself, extremely noteworthy, okay, because it increases, for just like the limit breaks on it, it increases the party's max Brave and attack by a very large amount, okay? Very large. So she's got very competitive auras just from this, okay? She also, on casting her LD, gains a new effect, a special effect in Overhead, which gives her attack and brave damage up for herself. And it also increases party Brave damage and Overflow and party Brave gains up, much like Purim. So she's the second character that can do that. She also gets a new HP plus, something like that. It just hits harder. It's not something you're really going to be using all that much. And then on her LD boards, she gets buff start. So she gains this special effect at the start of the fight, which is really good. Okay. But she also starts with a single use of the Brave Plus, the special one with the Confusion. So if the enemy, okay, if they don't actually need to get any turns, if you're going for like a no boss turn run, or you're trying to set up really quickly so you can go into a very early burst, this can hugely enable that kind of thing, right? Her LD call is party Brave damage and Stolen Overflow up, which is very nice. And as for her high armor, it is the Encouragement armor, so she gets that extra battery really, really good considering how much of it she does. And then the High Armor Plus is the party split armor, so she'll increase your Brave and HP damage caps equally. However, on this banner, she is featured with Sayador, who the only thing he gets here is his High Armor Plus, which is his base high armor is Unity Keystone, so it's increasing party damage output. But his High Armor Plus is from Self, so it's selfish, and it increases his Brave damage, which is fine, but you're not really going to be using him a ton right now. He's nice to have in your pocket in case you ever need like a cleanse or something like that, but you typically probably won't be bringing him a ton unless you like the character, which is totally valid. If you like him, use him, go for it. The fight itself is it's literally the same Shinryu fight that we had for the very first Lufenia. There's very little that's different. I think they had special, like automatic HP attacks at different HP thresholds that would go off as soon as you triggered them, even without the boss getting a turn. But other than that, this is a really simple fight. It wasn't Lufenia Plus. It was kind of like the primer to Lufenia Plus, but it was still fairly easy because there's not that much that's changed. As for pulls, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get Agrias here. I would prefer to use tickets because I've got a fair number of them right now. Not like a ton, but I've got enough to give myself a decent shot at pulling Agrias. But there is something to be said for using gems here to ensure that I get Agrias and potentially Sayador along the way, because even though you're not really going to use him much right now, he does get a burst later. However, on the banner where he gets his burst, the other featured character is Cyan with his LD, and Cyan has an excellent LD, which I would very much like to get. So, I don't know. I think I'll be playing this one by ear. Not much more to say. Next up in the month, we have Rude's Lost Chapter, featuring Yuffie LD and rework. Rude here, he really only gets he gets his LD boards in his High Armor Plus, which his LD boards make his LD attack hit harder, and his buff from it gets 40%. He gets a max Brave up, okay, which is really nice for himself, as well as party gained Brave Overflow, and then when his HP is at 100% or more, he has Brave and HP damage up, which it's nice, but it's kind of a flimsy band-aid for his base kit, which is kind of outdated. Like, he needed a lot more to stay relevant. He was never really able to hold his own in the party as your solo support while also providing auras to the rest of the party, because his auras were crap. He basically made your party hit harder by battering them to Kingdom Come, and with the increased Brave gain reductions and stuff, he's not still doing that. If he had gotten some double dumps on his skills, like skill 1, or if he had gotten party Brave gain up on his LD boards, he would be fine, but he didn't, so he's not. His High Armor Plus is the party HP cap armor, which is nice given how much he batteries, I guess. You're probably not going to blue him. I might, just because Rude is my favorite. My 3 favorite Final Fantasy VII characters are Rude, Sid, and Tifa. So, I don't know. I'm between a rock and a hard place here. His LD call, however, has party gained Brave Overflow up, as well as the effect of his LD, where the party gains or transforms 500% of the HP they recover to Brave for a few turns, which could be useful in the right team comp. I don't know. It just, big letdown. Yuffie, on the other hand, different story. So with her rework, her skill 1 now gravity's even harder, so it reduces the target's brave by more, and then it gives her more battery before the first brave hit that it does. It now has a double dump with brave refund in between, as well as 20% splash, and it steals an extra buff, so now she's taking 2 instead of just 1, so she's a lot more efficient, and this is a really good attack. Her skill 2 now has more battery for herself, it has more hits, and it doesn't miss, which these are all kind of, whatever. The big change here is that now, instead of just doing, I think it was attack, defense, and poison before transferring debuffs, she now, with the change to the number of debuff slots that we have, she now throws at the enemy physical attack, magical attack, regular attack, defense, max brave, and initial brave downs. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 debuffs, right? As well as a poison debuff and action to lay up. So basically, there's more space between their turns. So she throws 8 debuffs at them, and then she transfers debuffs. So she will always fill up the number of slots that they have, which is really nice, because her LD has her LD starts out, it's got a debuff on it that lasts, I think it's 6 turns, don't quote me on that, which is attack, defense, and speed down, as well as a sap. And the sap is unique in that it steals more brave based on the number of debuffs that the enemy has, which is pretty nice. The attack itself is a 1-hit AoE attack with 7 HP dumps, and then it batteries. This one's kind of weird. It batteries, instead of giving you a brave refund in between each one like a lot of attacks do, this one works a little more like Cloud's, I think it's his skill 1 and 2, or his burst is a really good example of this, where she'll do all of these attacks, and then before the last one, she will battery herself based on the amount of damage that you've dealt before that on this particular attack. It's split damage. I think it is an AoE brave attack, I think. And it gives her a free skill use, as well as her new buff for, I think it's 8 turns. This buff, super helpful. Oh my god. So you start out with +2 to all of her buff durations while it's up, which is really nice considering that the max brave up from her skill 1 only lasted for 1 turn. Now it's 3 turns, which is not a lot longer, but it helps. And then with her EX and her skill 2 buffs, they last longer as well, so you're not having to spam skills quite as hard. You still can, but it's way easier to do so without having to, or it's easier to mix in your brave and HP attacks with her if you want to do that without having to worry about your buffs dropping off. Okay. As for the other part of this buff, the LD buff, at the end of all of your party members' turns, they will get a brave refund or battery based on 20% of the HP damage that they dealt that turn, which is very nice. It's similar to Rosa. However, Yuffie herself also gets brave and HP damage up based on the number of debuffs on the enemy, and this scales all the way up to 40%, which is huge. Now, consider that LD attack is 7 HP dumps. 7 HP dumps with 40% brave and HP damage up. Yeah. So, additionally, while this buff is up, she gets a new brave and HP plusity plus. I don't know how many pluses there are. The brave one is it's an HP attack that has a party battery attached to it, and it has brave refund. And then the HP version it has splash damage, and it batteries the party before you do it. So these are both useful kind of utility attacks, but not something you necessarily need all the time, especially since she has brave refund on her LD buff. For her LD boards, she gets party attack up, which is really nice. She gets debuff start for her LD debuff, as well as buff start for that LD buff, so you don't have to necessarily use it turn 1. Very nifty. And then her LD attack itself will now dispel 1 buff before it initiates the attack, which helps it make room for, you know, the debuff itself, in case you know they're full on framed debuffs and then they've got that 1 buff or whatever. So it's kind of like Reno's pyramid, basically, which it's really nice. Her LD call is it's the same attack. It inflicts the debuff and it does dispel 1 buff on every target. So this is like a pocket dispel, which could be really useful. And then for her high armor, it is the Tactics Keystone, the debuff armor, which works very well for her because her kit is all about, you know, crippling the enemy. And then the high armor plus is the party HP cap armor, which is probably more useful than it would initially appear, given that a lot of her attacks are battery based and not necessarily tons of brave hits. But even then, you know, when you've got 40% HP damage up, you're probably going to want to be able to increase that cap. So she definitely is able to help herself reach that. Personally, as for pulls, I'm going in with tickets, probably tickets, maybe gems, but I will spend as many as it takes because I love Yuffie in this game. She's super fun, and this is a fantastic upgrade for her. As for the fight, right. The fight is still, it's a triple fight, triple enemy fight. Jesus, I can speak. It's a triple enemy fight, okay? And the orb is sap, so you do have to let the enemies get turns. But you could probably brute force this as well. This fight has kind of over time become one of the sort of punching bag stages to test and show off new units in. I believe at HP thresholds, they gain this like red aura, and then they will automatically put a debuff on your party, which is a framed freeze. But if you have debuff evasion, nothing happens. So whatever. That being said, the point is what they want you to do is to take this debuff and then throw it back at them with Yuffie, at which point, you know, they're harmless. They can't do any damage to you, so whatever. Other than that, I think the only thing of note, I think they get shields at some point. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've done this stage. But overall, very easy fight. Really looking forward to Yuffie. Her alternate costume, it's alright, I guess. On to the next event for the month, we come to Transcendence Tier 4, featuring Barret LD and the return of Yang. Yang here only gets his high armor plus, which is it's a attack keystone, but it is the brave damage armor. So his follow-ups and counters and stuff will be hitting harder because they'll be dealing more damage on each brave hit. Barret, however, gets a rework as well as his LD, which is skill 1. The only thing that they changed, and this is a little sad to be honest, it gains 80% splash damage. That's it. 80% splash, nothing else. His skill 2, the effect of his buff becomes stronger, which is okay, I guess. But they literally did nothing else to change the attack. So, onto the LD. The LD itself is a 1-hit attack. Done 10 times, but the HP attacks are distributed randomly amongst the enemies after the first one. And then he gains 1 stack. It's a stacking LD buff. He gains 1 stack of it for, I think it's like 12 turns or something. So it lasts for a while, but you only get 1 stack, right? The buff itself max at 3 stacks, so you're going to have to use this a couple of times to get there. But much like Squall's LD and Amiditelian, the game remembers how many stacks you were at. So if it ever drops off and you use it again, you won't have to rebuild up, right? What it does is it gives self and party brave and HP damage up based on how many stacks you have. So the part for himself is stronger. I think it's 10% per stack or something like that. And then the party is 5%, so half of that. But it also grants party crit rate up. I think it's 100% crit rate. And then when you're at 3 stacks, Barret's Brave cannot drop below 10% of his max Brave. And he also gets some upgraded Brave and HP plus attacks, which, whatever. For the LD boards, he does get buff start, so he gains 1 stack of this LD buff at the beginning of the fight, which is nice, because it doesn't exactly have a ton of uses. The attack itself gets more hits, it deals more damage, and then it also gets Brave Refund in between the attacks, so it will deal a lot more damage. And the LD attack itself deals a lot of damage. It's quite good. The problem is the rest of his kit. It's kind of doo-doo. So, just be aware of that. His call ability is party max Brave and attack up. I do not remember if it's his skill 2 or his skill 1. It's probably skill 2 based on that. And then the LD call is party crit rate and Brave damage up, which is okay, I guess, but it's not exactly like you're going to need that a ton. Or are you? Stay tuned. So, overall, and his high armor is the support armor. That is the high armor plus is a party split, so it increases your Brave and HP caps. Overall, I think Barret, he's kind of mediocre. Mediocre might even be a little too strong because he's not great. I would like to get Barret. I might use tickets for him here. I don't know. He does come back on the Kane Intertwined Will. The Kane event where Kane gets his LD, which I would like to pull for. So I don't know. I would be okay with just waiting on this because it's not like I'm really going to use Barret. His main utility is, he grants party crit rate up, which you can do with other characters, and the Brave and HP damage up aren't so much that you are going to be clamoring, oh man, I sure wish I had Barret in my party. This would be so much easier. Like, no, never going to happen. As for the fights themselves, so the last couple of Transcendences were pretty easy, and this one, they kind of went back to getting a little more difficult. The left fight is the Garnet Flans, and I believe the orb was Cleanse, I think I've only done, I don't remember whether or not I've completed this stage on JP, not gonna lie to you. I think I did it recently. I seem to remember that the ads have their own recast, and that both the ads and the kind of main Flan does a lot of they do a lot of debuffing and AoE attacks. Could be wrong. I don't know. I'm very tired. For the right side, the orb is ranged, which is fairly easy to take care of. They're really trying to get you to bring Barret here. They do periodically gain an aura that you have to dispel by doing crit damage on, like, over the course of multiple turns. Otherwise, bad things happen. And I think they also they counter melee attacks, I believe, with an instant kill. So magic is fine. Melee, not so much. Don't bring Golbez here. Don't do it. And then the center stage, first wave is the Vane horses, so be prepared for a lot of HP attacks. And I believe what happens here is that both of the bosses, they have this mechanic where it's kind of like Alexander. If you don't let them get turns, if you take too many turns in a row, then they go immune, basically. and then they force you to let them have a turn. So do be careful of that. The orb on the second wave is crit damage, and I don't remember what the enemy type here was. Kind of fuzzy. I do remember that the orb is crit damage, and that's about it. I seem to... Setzer? If memory serves, Setzer was kind of the star player on this stage, kind of like Warrior of Light was for Tier 3. Overall, I mean, there are a lot of different ways that you can get through this if you're really struggling with, range damage. There's plenty of characters that can work with that. You've got Cypher, you've got 9. 9 is really good because he's got the crit damage as well. So it may be worth, if you have his LD, bringing him out to this particular stage or this particular tier of Transcendence. I'm not sure what I want to run here, but I do think that for the right side, and probably the middle, I will probably run 9, and then hopefully I will have Yuna for the left side. I think it would be really interesting to try and run Yuna with 9, because I cannot wait to see what kind of damage a 9 EX does backed by all of Yuna's auras. This should be very entertaining. So, next up we have the Astaroth raid featuring Exdeath's BT, beginning of his BT cycle. For this one, on the one banner, you've got Exdeath with his LD inversed along with Kieran's LD, and then the other one is Lion and Ignis, both of whom have their LD. And these four, obviously, they get their high armor plus as well. So, God, why does my voice sound so weird? Starting with Ignis, he just gets his high armor plus, which is the support armor for the base version, and then for the high armor plus, it is the party based armor. It's got the even Raven HP split, which is pretty decent for him. If you plan on using him a lot, it might be worth maybe not bluing just yet, but maybe kind of slowly over time. He does get his C90 a little ways in the future, which returns with Titus's BT plus, and I want to say it was it Seador? I don't remember who the other character was. Point being, he gets rework with it, and it's actually pretty good. So for the Ignis fans out there, definitely something that might be worth picking up and kind of working on over time. That being said, next up we have Kieran, who gets his LD boards and his high armor plus as well. For Kieran, first off, his LD boards give him an extra use of his LD, which is really good because it helps him with maintaining his stacks, which was always his big weakness. The LD itself, as far as what it gets on the boards, it gains more Brave and it hits harder, so it just basically does more damage, and it has Brave refund between the two dumps, which is always nice. The buff itself that it gives you also gets +2 to its duration, so it does have a bit higher in terms of uptime. Oh, I'm sorry, it's +2 for the EX and skill 1 buffs. Sorry, my mistake. I can read my own notes sometimes. The other thing that it gives you is it improves his soul shot, his HP plus. It gets another plus on it, which turns into a double dump with splash, which does pretty competitive damage. Overall, oh, and the buff itself, the LD buff, it gives you better Brave Regen. Sorry, this isn't the worst segue you've ever heard. It's all related. It gives you better Brave Regen for your characters, as well as increasing Kieran's own Brave damage and overflow, so he'll be able to pump out more damage. And then it's got party Brave and HP damage up, which helps cement him as one of the better, at least in terms of his auras. He's a very good aura bot for your party. He does pretty much everything outside of healing, and there are plenty of characters that you can take for healing. My personal plans are to try and use him with somebody like Leon. As for his high armor, he has the support keystone, And the High Armor Plus itself is the, once again, the split armor for the party, so Brave and HP damage up, which is nice because he's gonna, with his modifiers, he'll be helping them hit higher Brave caps and HP caps. So definitely worth picking up. I think if I can manage to get his LD, I'll probably at least put a book in it. As for the LD call, it gives party initial Brave and Brave regen, which kind of go hand in hand. But it also gives Brave and HP damage up, as well as increased overflow, which is pretty nice. I suppose you could slap that on a burst unit right before you go into burst. But there are other options that might be a little bit better, like maybe Cam or possibly Terra, something along those lines. Waka is still, totally usable for that. So I'm not necessarily sure if you would ever really use that LD call, but it's there, you can do it. Really good character though. Next, we've got Lion, who gets her LD, which, as far as the attack goes, it is a single target attack. It's a double dump that has splash damage. And then if the enemy isn't targeting Lion, which is kind of her whole gimmick, the whole sneak attack thing, it deals weakness damage and is guaranteed hit, so it never misses. And then it gives you a 12-turn buff that gives her attack and stolen overflow up, as well as increased crit damage and HP damage up, which the two of those things together are huge. She is really churning out numbers. However, I think perhaps the most impactful portion of this LD buff, and maybe people will overlook this, is that it allows her to ignore the conditional of the enemy has to not be targeting her to power up her skills and deal more damage. So you will basically guarantee that you've always got the improved, the hide versions of skill 1 and skill 2. And when this buff is up, it also triggers her follow-up attack, which is, I think it's a 4-hit attack. It's single target. Wait a minute, it's 2 hits twice, so 4 hits. But it's a double dump attack with with Brave Refund afterward. So super safe attack for her. It is guaranteed hit and weakness damage because, again, it's ignoring the if you're not targeted conditional for her stuff. But it also has a single buff dispel attached to it. Super useful if you're going up against an enemy that buffs pretty frequently. Like, this would have been really good against the Meriliths in the most recent Equinox fight. Not the most recent one. Wait, no. We haven't gotten the, what do you call it? The Umbral Equinox yet. But the Meriliths, great example. Someone you want to be dispelling all the time. And you could probably, if you haven't cleared it already, you could take this to the Act 3, Chapter 4, Part 1 boss for Yuna, because the Sanctuary Keepers like to buff themselves, particularly with HP regen, which is really annoying. Right, I've kind of gotten off topic. Her LD boards, give her LD attack. I swear I can speak English. Her LD boards give the attack itself Bravery Refund, which again makes her kit very, very safe. And then she gains a new Bravery attack, which is kind of like Noel or some of the other characters, Agrias, who have a utility attack as their upgraded Bravery HP attack. This one deals weakness damage, doesn't have an HP dump, but it will allow you to choose one of your allies, kind of like Ignis or someone like that, and it will warp Lion's turn immediately after them, so you can always guarantee that your EX is going to be the really souped up version with the extra cast on it, which is really nice. As for her call abilities, her regular one gives you attack and crit rate up, which is, is decent, I guess. And then the LD version, which this one's probably a little bit better, It grants attack and crit damage up, as well as increased overflow and HP damage up. So you could realistically probably use this for a burst cycle, and or not a burst cycle, but a burst phase, and really crank out some numbers on that. As for her high armor, it is the attack keystone, which makes sense. She's doing a lot of brave and HP attacks, doing a lot of damage. And then the high armor plus leans in the brave damage direction, which I'm pretty sure the highest hit count she has on one of her abilities, her EX, I think it's 4. So this is going to be really useful if you're one of the, 4.5 people that really love Lion, to help you hit her HP caps more easily. Lastly, the man, or I guess the tree of the hour, is Exdeath himself. He gets a rework here. His skill 1 it reduces enemy brave more, and it gives him more brave gain off of it. So essentially you're doing more damage, both to their brave and obviously their HP, which is really nice because the quote unquote the potency, it's not that great right now. So it is very beneficial because you're going to be spamming this skill a lot. It also increases the amount of splash damage that it does to any target that has his Blood of Darkness debuff up on them, which, if you're playing Exdeath, all of your enemies should have this up pretty much 100% of the time. And because it caps out at 3 stacks, it actually increases his his HP splash damage up to 80% here. So his skill 1 is almost 100% splash. It's pretty close. Very, very nice, because going from 50 to 80, this is really going to increase his damage output, particularly on the handful of triple bosses that you see. As for his skill 2, it becomes a double cast attack. So he gains a bunch of brave, reduces theirs, does an HP attack, and then does it again. Triggers back to back really quickly. The debuff that's attached to it, which is Curse, is also improved so that the attack, defense, and I think it's speed down are a bit stronger. And then the HP poison portion of it is also stronger. So compared to right now on global, it's about a 50% increase in HP damage per turn, which is very, very nice because the HP damage dots, the ticks, are where a lot of his damage is. It's probably something like half of his damage over the course of a fight, so super, super important. As for his LD boards, right off the top, they grant him an extra 80% attack, which for a character who functionally is just battering himself and reducing enemy brave based on his attack and nothing else, this is extremely important, very impactful. And then as for the LD itself, the attack gains more bravery when you use it, also very nice, because sometimes you're going to come in just below that cap. And it also has more overflow. And then similarly to his skill 2, the LD debuff, the HP poison does more HP damage as well, which it deals the same amount now as his skill 2, which effectively triples the poison ticks that the LD does, because right now it does 50% of the damage of the skill 2. So a lot more off-turn damage from Exdeath, which is really where he kind of finds his home. He's still really, really good in boss rush stages. He also gets a burst, which, oh my goodness, this burst. For the attack itself, it's a double dump AoE HP attack, full damage to all enemies. And then he sets up a burst effect, which it only lasts for 3 of his turns. But the way that it works is at the beginning of every turn, whether it's an enemy turn, an ally turn, doesn't matter what action happens, he does AoE HP damage to all enemies on the field, and it's based on his attack. So it's really, really easy to buff this and see it skyrocket. And it really benefits turn stealers, characters who, can spam their C65s. If you happen to have a character like coming up later, Zell is really good here. Characters with instant turn rate, stuff like that. Re-rate characters like Lightning or Aranea, they're going to be really, really good here because they're going to take all of those extra turns. And because the BT effect isn't ticking down, you're just going to be dealing more and more and more and more and more damage, which actually forms a neat little combo here with Ignis, who, if you use his, skill 2 for cooking, and then you choose either one of the stances, and then you can either hit skill 2 again and kind of loop it, toss in a skill 1 if you need to refresh one of his buffs or something like that. But you can effectively probably take about 12 to 16 turns in a row with Ignis, and that's, on average, it's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 200,000 AoE HP damage. And by AoE, I mean to both targets, that you can pump out every single one of those turns. And like I said, that does also apply to things like C65s. So this is really, really strong, and it's it's hilariously easy to abuse. If you do manage to pick up Exdeath BT, do everybody a favor, set him as your friend unit, and we will all love you. As for his LD call, this one isn't that great. It does the attack, which, obvious, and then it inflicts both of his debuffs for 4 turns. So the Bud of Darkness and the HP Poison, they're not going to be that great, so not really worth using. And then as for his high armor, it is the Tactics Keystone, which does help him further cripple enemies. He's got a very nice suite of attack and defense down on his various debuffs. And then obviously his high armor plus, he is unique in this one as the only character in the game that has a 0-4 split. So it's all HP damage because he deals no grave damage. Not surprising. Personally, I've already got his LD. My plans are to pull here to try and pick up Kieran's LD because I actually really like Kieran, and I would like to see myself try and use him with some characters like Leon or whoever. But my goal is to get that Kieran LD and then dip out because I do want Exdeath BT, but I am okay with tokening it. As for the Lufenia, this one, it's honestly not that bad. It's the Exdeath boss, once again, the Astaroths, which their whole gimmick is when you break them, they turn around and blow you up, right? So don't break them when they've got their aura up, and you will be fine. They only do that one at a time. So if the left one has the aura, then the one on the right won't, and vice versa. The orb itself is, I forget what the tick up is. I think it's plus 10 or plus 15 or something like that for doing HP poison damage and allowing them to have a turn. But you can also tick it up by 1 by just inflicting 2 debuffs in a turn, so 1 to each one. And there are so many characters that can do that it's kind of hilarious. Their counterattack, when you break them, it does HP damage. And honestly, you could slap Warrior of Light into your party and then just go to town with whoever. Personally, I am going to be using Exdeath at some point, and I'll just record a synergy run. But I'm also going to try this one out running probably Cypher and just laughing as they repeatedly do nothing to me. Next up, we've got Xande's Lost Chapter, featuring the return of his LD as well as him getting his LD boards, and Zell's LD. To start with, Xande, he doesn't get a ton off of his LD boards. It looks like it's pretty useful on paper, though. His LD itself, the attack becomes a triple cast instead of a double cast, so it will deal more damage, it hits harder, and when you use it, it grants you an extra stack of his Circus Tower overhead buff. The effect. The effect itself, when you have at least 1 stack, which is basically all the time, it increases his crit damage, and he gets elemental weakness damage up and HP damage up, and this is per stack. So I think the HP damage caps at 30% up, which is pretty useful for someone who relies on splash damage, and especially in the case of his EX, he should be capping more frequently and doing a lot more damage. As for his high armor, it is the attack keystone, and it is split between brave and HP damage, so theoretically this should increase, if in the event that you actually decide to blue him, this should increase the floor as well as the ceiling of his damage, which will help him. However, let it be said that the reaction that people had to him was less than stellar. A lot of people think that he's really not going to be all that great here. I can't really comment myself. I still don't have his LD on JP, but I definitely want to try and get some use out of him, possibly with one of the really, really good Aura bots from this month, like Kieran or Yuna. Next up, we have Zell, the real star of the show here, who is a meme no longer, or at the very least, just a different kind of meme. He gets a rework here. So, two of his passives change. One of them becomes additional speed when he's buffed, and then his C50 is more brave damage when he's buffed, as opposed to when his dual buff is up, which is a nice change because he burns through that really quickly. And it also improves the buff he gets from skill 1 and skill 2, so that it increases the max brave attack that it gives him. So this already is pretty good change. As for his skills, skill 1 hits harder and has brave refund. It fills his recast gauge a bit more, so he gets his EX more quickly. And this one has no action delay, no turn count, and it doesn't use up an ability, so this one is actually really good. Once his dual buff is up, the alternate form of his skill 1, the transformed one, it's got more battery and it's 100% splash. That's the only change here. As for his skill 2, it also hits harder and has brave refund, and also has the no turn count or ability use, but this one is not instant turn. The transformed version of his skill 2 now has battery before the brave hits, so it's going to be doing more damage. It also hits harder and is a triple cast skill, so 3 HP dumps, and it has brave refund in between. As for the LD attack itself, this is kind of like almost like a mini burst phase, where you've got a double dump attack that's got 20% splash. It has no action delay, no turn count, and it will extend all of his buffs by 4 turns. And then it gives him a new buff, 1 stack of it, for 4 turns, and it changes his LD skill. While this buff is active, it increases its stat count by 1 every turn that he takes, and it caps out at 4. And once you hit 4, the only thing that Zell can do is use calls or his LD skill, which transforms into My Final Heaven. And what the buff itself also does is it gives him brave and HP damage up based on the number of stacks he has, so up to 30%, which is really, really good for him. And while it's up, all of his attacks will re-break, or rather reset the enemy's break status before the attack. So it is possible for him to function in the same line as like Ardyn or Lightning or similar. Additionally, when he does break someone while this buff is up, he gets a free turn right off the bat. Do note, however, that this LD buff cannot be extended, so no hope, no Yuna, nothing like that. The alternate version of the LD, the My Final Heaven attack, is an AoE, I believe it's a triple cast? Don't quote me here. That does have refund. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. Split damage and refund in between attacks. And that's actually part of his LD boards. It's normally a double dump attack. But with his LD boards, it becomes a triple dump, as does his initial LD use. He also gains buff start for his, I think it's called Balam's Rowdy Punk or Rowdy Upstart or something like that. He gains buff start for that, which is really nice. The LD itself, both versions, it will hit harder. And then his dual buff gains crit damage up and HP damage up. And the crit damage is 50%, which is pretty big. And 20% HP damage up for someone who is basically taking as many turns as Zell does is pretty big. He basically becomes this sort of mini BT phase rebreak monster that just cranks out damage. If you do enjoy playing Zell, you may want to look at his high armor, which is the attack keystone. No surprise there. But the high armor plus is it leans in the brave damage direction, which most of his attacks don't have that many brave hits, but they do have a fair number of HP attacks on them. Keep in mind that after you use skill 1 and skill 2, it will trigger the other one on the base version. So he's actually hitting fairly hard, fairly frequently, and this will help increase his brave damage to allow him to do more HP damage every turn, which is really, really good. He does a ton of work. As for his calls, his base call is max brave and attack up, but it also has a really meaty 60% defense down on it, which could be useful. And the LD call is brave and HP damage up, which is not bad. The fight, the Lufenia fight, it's the same bosses from before. I think they're called Assault Dogs, which honestly were pretty annoying the first time around. And the orb here is +1 whenever you break the enemy, and +1 for doing dark damage. So realistically, you could bring Xande here or Zell. I'm pretty sure, I haven't checked the resistances. I believe you can get lightning through this one, as well as, characters like RNA and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure that, given the way that he works, core is going to be really, really solid here, especially if you've got some form of enchant like Xande. As for pulls, I think I'm going to skip this one. Normally, I don't really like skipping units when they first get their LD, because a lot of the time, you're missing out on a big power boost for them, and it's more efficient to pull on their release. But Zell comes back later on with his C90, so it's a tuning pass for him and not just a rerun. And he comes back with Lud, whatever his name is, from Revenant Wings, who I'm actually really interested in playing around with. So I think I may skip this one entirely and just wait until he returns, because there are other characters that I am really interested in pulling. On the other hand, because he's rebreaking all the time, he's going to pair really well with Vayne, who I very much want to use. So I'm not entirely sure what I want to do here, but I'm leaning towards skipping. Lastly, for the month, we have Act 3, Chapter 4, Part 2, featuring the return of Vivi LD to Global. A lot of people are probably going to skip this one, because when he released as a Global First, a lot of people pulled really, really hard for Vivi. His bannermate here is Deuce, which a lot of people skipped with Amiditalian's Lost Chapter. I don't know how many people are going to pull here for either of these characters, although I do think Deuce is hugely overrated, but I also think she is best girl in Type 0. Fight me. Anyway, Vivi gets a rework here. So his skill 1, Fire, it becomes AoE, which is really nice. AoE brave hits, sorry, to be more specific. And it also gets splash damage, which is really, really nice. And then his skill 2 is instant turn rate. It hits harder, and it has Brave Refund attached to the end of it. So when you go into your next turn and you press, EX or whatever, it's going to deal a lot more damage because it's starting off better. As for his much vaunted, much anticipated LD boards, the ones that he didn't get when he first got his LD, that didn't have a rework, which made him an absolutely terrible character. How dare you pull for him? His LD hits harder, and it now grants its effect, the stacks before he attacks, which ties into what it does. The effect itself, it gets elemental weakness damage up, as well as HP damage up, which is really nice because everything he does is elementally locked because he has a fire enchant on the effect. And then when you have at least one stack, he gets even more HP damage up. So now that he's getting that effect on cast of the ability, he's going to be hitting a lot harder from the get-go. Still really nice for automatically activating like your Ardyn or I don't know, this might work for Leviathan, I think, but it definitely works for Diablos. It's really nice for activating those, you know, whenever your HP drops below X threshold, you know, passives. As for his high armor, he already had the regular version, the attack keystone, but he gets the high armor plus here, which is the Braven HP, the even split, which is nice. You know, he deals a fair amount of bravery damage. Most of his attacks are AoE in some way, shape, or form, and with that extra HP damage up that he has, it's also going to allow him to reach even higher caps, especially paired with, you know, one of the really good supports that we have. So he got a really nice improvement here. Although I'm sure a lot of people on Global will whine and complain that, oh, he didn't get that much from his LD boards. Well, that's because his LD was super good to begin with. So shut up. As for Deuce, the only thing she gets here is her High Armor Plus, which is it leans in the HP plus direction. So it's a little bit of brave damage and a lot of bit of HP damage. I think she is going to be on my back burner in terms of High Armor Plus. I've already got Deuce's LD. I pulled big time for that. I say big time, I got it in like 40 or 50 tickets or something like that, because I actually really like Deuce. She's been consistently one of my favorite characters since I started this game, which was back when Beatrix released for the, I think it was the first anniversary, and Deuce was like the first or second character or something like that immediately after. I remember skipping Leon's event because I was a moron and didn't know how this game worked, and I was like, oh, well, I don't need Leon, I've got Beatrix, and that was really stupid. So I've been using Deuce for a very long time. She's super fun to play, she's really neat. Once again, best girl, don't at me. So at some point in time, I think I would like to blue this armor, especially since I really enjoy running Emperor. And I think she could be really interesting alongside someone like, maybe not Yuna, but perhaps the twins, or possibly Shantoto or something like that. So experimenting with, you know, favorite units and stuff like that, always a great idea. You never know what kind of crazy combinations you can come up with. She might even actually be really interesting with Renoa, who comes out with her LD boards the month after next, so right at the beginning of BT Plus, alongside Y'shtola, Zidane, and Beatrix. And I'm determined to use Renoa a lot more. But once again, I am skipping. I have both of the LDs from this banner. I have absolutely nothing that I need. And by this point, if I do in fact skip the Xande and Zell banner, then honestly, if I don't have it by the time I get Kieran's LD, I'm just going to token it and, you know, bounce. As for the fight, the Lufenia, the orb is to deal fire damage and at least 150 HP damage in one turn, which is hilariously easy to do with any number of characters. You can run Ignis here, who has Party Fire enchant, and like literally any like AoE damage dealer. If you ran Ignis and Core here, for example, the orb itself is going to be a non-issue, and they'll probably delete their own turns because big yikes. But you could also get by, obviously, with Vivi, because that's what he's here for. He will clap this fight up so hard. But I'm pretty sure that I've seen at least a couple of runs on JP that were running like Lulu Call. So, I mean, you know, get creative. This fight, not particularly difficult, not threatening, go nuts. So that's it for the month. I think that I'm going to try and do a little bit of saving here because it's going to be really rough the first half of the month because I am going to be doing my best to land Yuna, Agrias, and Yuffie. And then the last half of the month, I'm really only going after Kieran, and then we're done. This will give me a little bit of a reprieve, just to save up a little bit for BT Plus, Lufenia Plus, yada yada, etc. So yeah, that's what I think about this upcoming month. Let me know what you think. Let me know how you feel about the format. Let me know in the comments what your polls are going to be like, and whether or not you agree that Juice is best girl. Spoiler alert, she is. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff. And I will see you next time. Take care.